The reason why I took the course is I had a student 2 years ago who I could not teach to read. She would take 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. And she was one of the oldest kids in my classroom. And I have a master's degree. I should be able to teach her. And she wasn't learning. So I started to look into, well, does she have dyslexia? Okay, well, what is dyslexia? Because I don't know. Never been trained on it. I always thought it was just backwards letters. And a friend of mine added me to a Facebook group called The Science of Reading, What I Should Have Learned in College. And I spent hours, I'm almost embarrassed to say hours on Facebook, reading articles, reading posts, watching videos, listening to podcasts. P-E-O-P-L-E, people. A red word is a word that is very common in the English language, but it's got some tricky spelling patterns. So, like today they just did people. Well, people is not phonetic. It's not spelled phonetically. In my classroom, I call it stinky English. That it's not spelled the way it sounds. So they learn what sounds are typical, like the P and the E, but they also realize that there are parts of that word that are not typical, like the O and the E at the end. And so by mapping those words out and using multisensory techniques, they really wire their brains to remember that word. P-E-O-P-L-E, people. When I was using this last year, some of my kids on a spelling test would be like, I don't know how to spell people. And I'd say, well, think about what we did. And I always had them loaded into their brain, so they'd say people. And then they tap it out on their arm, P-E-O-P-L-E. And the letters would just kind of fall out of their mouths. And they would say it more like P-E-O-P-L-E. And I'd say, yeah, that's right, write it down. I mean, it just, because they've practiced it so much and their brains have remembered that chunking of the letters and the tapping on their arms, and they were able to spell words that I had never seen kids be able to spell in first grade correctly, like address and bankrupt, and it was magical. And when those kids are running around the classroom and they're like, Mrs. Aldinger, look, I see a red word, or look, there's a vowel team in this word, or look, that says there's a TCH at the end of that word because it has one short vowel and one syllable and one sound to ch. They take ownership of it because they start to realize how smart they are. And it was amazing. I mean, there were many times I had to look away and try not to cry because it was so powerful, giving them the tools that they needed to become fluent readers and writers.